All right, everybody. Good afternoon and welcome to this wonderful Tuesday edition of the On Air Advocate. Where at the On Air Advocate, we look to provide education, support, and empowerment for all of those with different abilities, mental and medical illnesses, and their caregivers. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Tammy Flynn, and I am the host and producer of the On Air Advocate. And I am super excited that you are all here this Tuesday afternoon, or you're catching it on the replay. Now, know that this whole entire month we have dedicated to autism awareness through supports, education, and empowerment. So if you feel that this broadcast could be beneficial for any friends, for anybody that you may know, please hit the share button and the like button and get that content into their right hands. So with that being said, one of the things that I always say is that as being a special needs mom, that some of the best information and best content that we ever learn is from other people's journeys, other mom and dad's journeys that have gone through it. And so when I got the graceful opportunity to be introduced to this amazing woman, Miss Kate Taylor, I was like, everyone needs to hear her story. Because as we know as special needs parents, sometimes it can be daunting as to what's going to come at each milestone and what is going to happen with our kids and are they ever going to move out and, not be with us forever. And so when I met Kate and found out that she has a 27-year-old and a 33-year-old son, both sons that both have autism, and they both are living not in her home with her in different independent living situations. I was just so excited that she said yes, Kate, that you said yes to be on the show today. So welcome, Kate.
Thanks, Tammy. So happy to be here.
Yeah, so I feel like maybe we should start at the beginning. Obviously, your kids now, they're not kids anymore. I know we always call them kids because they're always their kids, but they are young or middle-aged, actually, young adults, middle-aged adults.
Young
and
adults.
So
Yeah.
how did that journey start? Because, both of your sons, and you only have two children, right? Or do you have more than two children?
I have three. I have a middle daughter between the boys.
Okay. And how old is she?
30.
30. Okay. So she's right in between. So when you had your first son, and what is his name?
Robert.
Robert.
Mm-hmm.
So when you had Robert, how did that journey start with you guys even figuring out, and I don't even know at that time, 30 some years ago, the whole thing of being on the spectrum, autism as a diagnosis.
Was unusual back then. And so we actually didn't get a diagnosis for Robert till he was 6 years old. They gave us a lot of in between, the catch-all PDD. We had that for several years, and language delay, and a number of MR. And then we finally got the autism diagnosis at age 6.
Now, what were things that you were seeing in him from the age of birth till the age of 6 that made you start to investigate, what's going on? Things don't seem like they're quite right.
Well, he was actually normally developing until age 2.5. He if anything, he would have been considered a gifted child. He talked on time. His language was normal. His preschool skills at age 2 were just unbelievable. That's why we thought this is a little genius kid, because he could do, anything, numbers, letters, shapes. He was very, loving. The only thing that concerned me that I took him to a developmental pediatrician for was the fact that his sleep was really off. He would wake a lot at night, and I couldn't understand. Nothing seemed to be wrong. And I did take him to a developmental pediatrician and said, do you know what this could be? And he evaluated him. He was actually a pediatrician trained by Brazelton, if you're familiar with him. And he said, this kid is normal. He's actually advanced. So don't worry, it'll work out.
Mm-hmm.
And then at 2.5, he lost his language and totally started regressing.
Really? Mm-hmm. And so is that something that's common that can happen, that kids can start out on one path and can kind of veer off?
Yeah, some kids, that's what happens. They regress, and then other kids from birth or something. There's moms who say that they're kids that would arch away from them when they were being held. Robert was never like that. He was, if anything, he was overly obsessed with being held. He wanted, I
Okay.
kept him in a sling all the time because he just wanted to be with me all the time.
And at that time, 33 years ago, was the process quite the same with the IEPs and those individual educational plans and behavioral plans? You know, in schools, how that's evolved. I mean, my son is going to be 21 this year. So I know that I've even seen kind of differences in the way things are approached and information and help and support
Yeah.
than what used to be there. What did you find? Because that 6-year-old age, would be going into first grade?
Yes, he went to first grade, and by that time we had moved back. We were in Hawaii when he was little, and then we moved back to mainland states, and went into a program in North Carolina called the Teach program,
Okay.
and it was specifically tailored towards kids with autism.
Okay. So he went into that program, and how long could he stay in that program at that time?
Um, Probably, I want to say about a year. He went in at age 5, I believe. No, 6, 6. Yeah, he stayed in for about a year, and then we started. He wasn't making it. He made very few gains, although it helped him a lot as far as
Hmm.
calm them down and made him. He's happy there. He wasn't making any gains, and then I read the book "Let Me Hear Your Voice" by Catherine Maurice.
Okay.
That was my first introduction to ABA, and so I, I one other mom in the town I lived. We were the only people in town doing ABA, so we got a consultant in. So I started an ABA program with Robert um, at
Okay.
age, but that was by age 9. So he was in the Teach program for 3 years, and he just took off at age
And
9.
what does ABA stand for? Just for
Applied behavioral analysis.
applied behavioral analysis. Okay. So you guys were the only two that had kind of started that, and that had seemed to be something that was extremely useful and helpful for you guys.
Oh, it was for both boys. By then, Sam had been born, and so I started a program with both of them at the same time. It was
Okay.
unbelievable turnaround in learning.
Okay. Now, your other son is 27, so
Mhm.
there's quite a few years of a gap between the two of them. When he was born, did you see signs right away? Did you
Yeah.
have your antennas up, like, because
Oh
you
yeah,
know
I
what
was
I'm
very
saying, you're
paranoid.
already in the realm?
I was very paranoid with the daughter in between too. If she would like
Mhm.
stare at a fan too long, I would say, "No, look over here," because it made me paranoid. But she's not autistic. But when Sam was born, so um, like Robert, he's appeared normal in every way, except for the only thing that was unusual, but you would never think autism, was that he didn't sleep much. And yet I remember my mother visiting right after he was born, and she was like, "I've never seen a newborn not sleep. He would just be awake all day, just looking around." But he was very interactive, very smiley,
Okay.
super happy baby. And then with him, he just at age 2, he started getting like a preoccupation with unusual things, like a hole in the wall where a nail had been. And then his language didn't come. And so at age 2, I started getting nervous.
Okay. And then you guys went for a diagnosis. Did you, at
Yes,
that point, I mean, I would think that you had quite a few years, because how old was your oldest at that time when
he
your
was
other son was diagnosed?
6, and then Sam got diagnosed, and no, is that right? 27.
It's all gets a little
5 years
confused when
different.
you have
So
all the
yeah,
kids.
he was about 8. He was about 8.
Your oldest was 8
Yes,
at the time when your youngest was diagnosed.
yes.
By the time he was 8, had you kind of sifted through already, going through all of the autism kind of content that was out there, and supports and
Oh
community
yeah,
things, and where to seek help? Did
yes.
you feel like you had done a lot of digging already by the time your second
Oh
son
yeah.
was
I
born?
mean, I read everything I could get my hands on.
Okay.
But keeping in mind at that point, there wasn't a lot. When Robert was diagnosed, there wasn't a lot out there. It's just that was like the beginning of the crest of the autism wave.
When your
Um,
second son was born.
mhm.
And then, so what were your supports that were really there, aside from like your pediatrician and your regular doctor, other like
They weren't
outside
really
specialists?
supportive. They were didn't. I had to educate them at that point. Pretty much anyone who worked with my older son, I had to educate them about ABA. And a lot of people were very resistant. They considered it to be negative, and they called it punitive.
Oh,
And I'm like, well, you know,
right.
yeah,
This is how he learns, and he,
yeah. We're not yelling at them or, making them feel like shamed in any way. We're just being real clear when something is incorrect and then making sure they get consequences for behaviors that are not acceptable.
now, I see out there now, as you know from us having back conversation, my son Marcus does not have autism.
Right.
So, especially this month, I've really thrown myself into meeting as many people as I can in all different realms to kind of get a better idea of the spectrum. Because just
Mhm.
because you know someone with autism doesn't mean you know autism, because there's such,
So different. Yeah.
yeah, such a spectrum and such a difference. Was there any of like Autism Speaks, and there's like autism solution pieces now, and there's the Autism Alliance. Was there any of those things back 33 years ago?
There was the Autism Society of South
Awesome. Okay.
Carolina. Oh, North Carolina. Well, then I was in North Carolina. So it was, but the state society, and then there was um, the program that helped me the most was in UCLA, ran the ABA. That was really where ABA started, and
Okay. At
Dr.
UCLA.
Lobos trained people. That's when we got our consultant. So they were a great source for behavioral help. And then a turning point as well came at about the same time for the medical help came from this doctor out of California named um, blanking on his name. Oh,
You can
Dr.
throw.
Michael Goldberg,
Okay.
and he addressed the immune dysfunction issues that really all three of my children have.
Okay. So they have some other health conditions aside from just the two boys, the autism, but all three of your kids have some immune.
Yes. And that was something that Dr. Goldberg recognized, but that the treating doctors where I lived said was nonsense. But it's interesting now. It's in the medical journals now, and it's being stated everywhere now as some new information. I'm like, no, this was around. You remember 25 years ago when you said Dr. Goldberg was a quack?
Right
This is way
now.
ahead of you guys.
Um, what immune disorder is it, and is it at all connected now, 30 some years later, to autism or kids on the
Yes, yeah,
spectrum?
and that's what they're finding. They're seeing these um, I want to say these factors that are common among a majority of the autism population, and then it's kind of making them look at why families like mine had multiples. Because, for instance, my family, we have a lot of autoimmune disease, and the kid's father's family, like they've got bipolar disorder. So the bipolar gene is on the same gene. Well, I might get a little boring with all this, but they're finding out they're finding out a lot of immune issues that occur in families that also occur in the kids who end up developing autism. And a lot of the breeding that I believe is
Mhm.
really touching on the truth is the ones that look at the immune the um, tendency for these kids to overreact to things in their environment that are allergenic, and then to have gut issues, and that creates all these multiple food allergies, and it goes on and on and on.
Okay. And so is there an actual immune disorder that it's called, or is it all just different when you're doing all of your blood and your tests and your studies, you're just finding differences in small areas that add up to one thing?
Right. It's what they'll do is like what Dr. Goldberg did and what doctors now are doing. Actually, there's a doctor here where I live now in Charleston that does the same thing. He does what they call an immune panel, and you can
Okay.
see, and that helps you know what's going on with the kids. So there's different groups of immune cells that everyone has, and there's
Mhm.
levels that are supposed to be your immune cells should be to indicate you have a normally functioning immune system. But these kids will have these hugely elevated levels of one immune protein that's showing that they're reacting to something they're eating or exposed to environmentally, and then they'll have really depressed levels of other immune cells that you and I who are healthy have
Mhm.
normal levels of, which shows why they can't handle common viruses that come through down the pipeline.
Okay. That's so interesting. And so you kind of you dove in to get as much research and information as you could as your boys were young. And, because obviously we're going from the age of 6 and 8, and now they're, 27 and 33.
Right.
What would you say some of your biggest challenges were during those elementary school ages and then into high school before we get to the, where I'm at now and so many of my friends are, where we're like, what's next? So they're 18. So they're 21,
I
like,
know
now
it's
what?
hard.
Now what? When you're shifted out of being in any kind of programming, the school system has, completely finished. You don't have those supports anymore. But before we get to that, what would you say, some of the biggest challenges or some of the best, I guess, tips that you could give in between that elementary age, the high school age that you faced?
Gosh, it's so hard because for me, one of the biggest challenges I had was exhaustion, because you have so much on you and it just seems so overwhelming. And then you have that social isolation piece, which just makes it all that much worse, because I know a lot of moms. I was so blessed to have a close friend who did this program like right alongside me. I don't know how I would have felt if I didn't have her, because I would call her on my worst day. And we always joke that my worst day was never her worst day. And so one of us was like, you're okay. You can do it. Keep going. Look how many, and then the other one of us would just reel off all the gains that our child had made. We're like, yeah. And it just kind of each other's cheerleader. So I think if you can find someone who you can talk to, relate to, who's in the same boat as you, because it's hard being around these moms and dads who have typically developing kids, and their biggest concern is Johnny didn't make the baseball team.
Mm-hmm. The select baseball team.
it's just disheartening, because you're struggling because your son is spitting on people or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, and or worse. And so I think that's one of the toughest things, the social isolation piece. And then for my kids, behavior was a real problem. Just it seemed like as soon as we got on top of one behavior, there was another one too.
And so were you finding that in school as well as at home? Like it was across the board? So you were dealing with the school and them calling you and things going on?
Because the schools were not equipped to implement ABA. They didn't have it. And so we had to bring our therapists in to train the schools. And that went well sometimes, and it went not well other times, depending on whether the people at the staff at the school understood what we were doing. Some people were receptive, some weren't. And that made for a good year or a bad year, depending on the environment, of the classroom environment. But what we tended to do is just, we followed the guidelines of our consultant, and we didn't have either boy in any more school time than they were successful at. So it would be a positive experience. Then we'd increase school as they were successful.
Okay, so did they go the majority of the regular school day then, or not really, kind of like half days?
They did. No, they did, but Robert never was able to. Well, what he did, it kind of changed as we moved around. Robert had one really great mainstreaming experience. That was in a little town in South Carolina. But the rest of the time, he ended up just being in a special ed class and being mainstream for like PE and, something like, some kind of non-academic time. Whereas Sam was able to be in fully integrated into the regular classroom.
Into the regular classroom all of the time. So the behavioral management, and at that time, I'm assuming if they didn't have the other program you were talking about, they definitely didn't have the like behavioral plan IEPs that were put into place.
They did.
Did they have those?
They did. But it's like anything else, is getting people trained on to implement it, remembering to implement them.
Right.
Or having the resources, like for instance, when the boys were in, it seemed to get harder and harder the older they got, because the ratio of teacher to student got worse, and our resources were drying up because they weren't given an aid, so we were going to have to supply that. So it was tough. So, it got harder at the more kids that were in a classroom, and whether that the teacher teaching that class was understanding that. If they were, it was a good class. If they weren't, could be a tough class.
Right. And I think what you spoke to is that, the best thing during the whole duration of time is finding yourself a support system, because you are
Yes.
so right. That isolation and the fact that every day there is something new, the exhaustion, it's just daunting a lot of,
Mhm.
a lot of the time. And, you need all of your energy to give them your energy,
Yes.
push them, because
Hmm.
you're the one that's always doing the push, or the one that's doing the the ask, you're the one who's advocating on an hourly. I always tell people, they're like, well, if I know how to advocate, I'm like, advocacy is not a thing you can do like every week or every couple of months. When you have your kids in any programs in the school, it is something that you're watching for and you're doing every single day.
Right.
Every
That's why it's so exhausting.
It is.
Right.
Yes. Now, high school, so they went through the elementary school. By the time that your oldest or even your youngest got to high school, was that kind of the birth of there being more programs and more support and more things kind of flourishing and opening at that time, or still
Not
not?
here. I know there are in some other places, and I remember many times thinking, if I could do it over, I would have
Hmm.
moved somewhere else.
Right. And that
Um,
I hear, a ton from parents, is that, just like our school that's here in Wisconsin, we have an amazing, amazing facility that there is not another one in the United States here, but it ends at
right,
21. And so then what? And we don't have a lot of great
right.
resources for those next steps after that. So a lot of times families move from place to place to try to get the
Mm.
best services possible. So they still in high school didn't have the best services that way. How did you plan for, both of them as they graduated? What did that plan look like for you
Well, to
from
be
high
honest,
school?
I I kind of played it by ear since that I didn't see anything on the horizon that looked really great as for them to move into. But
Mhm.
I put my attention on Robert first since it was gonna happen first, and also I didn't know. It was hard for me to know just how many advances they would make because they made such terrific, amazing advances all through the early years. And they continue to improve. So it's kind of hard to decide until you see what we're dealing with.
Mhm.
Robert, his senior year in high school, during that senior year, I started looking at job placement through the Disabilities Board here in
Okay.
Charleston, and um, I went, just traveled around, and they showed me what they had, and they had this one bakery that was operated that was just fantastic. I thought Robert could do this because other places I look like the workshops that most kids go to here,
Mhm.
he would have been miserable. There was real noisy. There were people who were unhappy. Robert is very sensitive to people's emotions, and
Okay.
if someone's crying, he's torn up. He can't function. So the
Right.
bakery was like a finely oiled machine. It was completely staffed by people with disabilities, and it was just fantastic. So he's been there since high school, from age 22 to 33.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So now, when did that pivotal point come for you that you found places for both of your boys to merge and bridge to? When did that come for your oldest, and when did that come for your second son?
Well, Robert, he lived at home with me until he was 22. No, sorry, 24. Um, he might have lived home with me longer, but he started getting some really, really severe behavior problems with the onset of seizures.
Okay.
He kind of had a personality change. And so I was a single mom, with the two kids with autism and a daughter who was very rebellious. And I was losing my mind, to be quite honest. And I thought, I've got to get on the group home list. I can't do this. I was actually encouraged by another mom with a disabled child. She actually encouraged me to do that. She said, what if something happens to you? They're going to take Robert and put him on. I thought, oh my gosh, yeah, no telling.
Right.
So um, I got on a list, and because I was a single mom with multiples, I got to the top of the list, and he got in the house. So
Okay.
that totally changed my life. To have Robert, I could see him as often as I was able. Was working full time, so it helped me tremendously in the way of transportation. And then they would transport him to his job that he'd already been going to at the bakery, and then I could get him to go do something fun after, and it's
Okay.
fabulous.
Now, when you were looking at that type of housing for him, what does that look like? So is he in in like an apartment thing with others? Is it
Yeah,
completely
it's actually a
supervised?
house. I've actually moved him since he started out with in a disabilities board house, and
Okay.
then a group came to Charleston called Community Options. Are you
Okay.
familiar with that? It's run by a nonprofit out of Princeton, New Jersey.
Okay.
Fantastic group.
We're going to drop
So
that below too. All these that we talk about, we're going to drop
yeah,
these names and stuff.
it is unbelievable. And I'll look for someone for you to interview from them. But they came to our area, and so I got on the waiting list for them, and Robert got a spot, and it is unbelievable. They've got this cute little house close to me. He's got 3 great roommates. The staff are fantastic. They do recreational stuff with them. They always are going somewhere, doing something fun locally, and they work around me, around times I can be available to grab Robert and go do something or come home. So it's a
And
huge blessing.
how many can be housed? How many kids can be housed there?
It pretty much, I'm pretty sure it depends on the size of the house, because what happens is Community Options comes in and they look for property in nice neighborhoods that they think their guys and young ladies would be happy living. They don't pick these rundown areas that, that parents would be like alarmed that their kids are living there. These are nice family neighborhoods and nice areas. And so they just go in, they find a house, and it might have 4 bedrooms, might have 5 bedrooms, might have 3 bedrooms. So that would dictate how many people can live there. But it's still fully staffed 24/7. So you never have to be concerned that your child is going to be, left to their own devices.
Right, right. Now, when you first made, so he was your first one,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, and the first transition. I mean, being honest, even though you were kind of losing your mind and it was a grace from God and you found, you know what I'm saying? You found the place. I can just imagine still inside of you, was it kind of like, he's not going to
Oh,
be
yeah.
with me?
I alternated like that.
Like, for how long did you feel that took before you felt like he's in a good place, that you felt good
Yeah.
about the decision?
It's funny. When it was really agonizing. And this wonderful woman that was coordinated the home from the disabilities board where he was placed, I guess she could see my anxiety. And she said, he's still yours. She
Right.
goes, if you decide tomorrow, you change your mind and you just come and grab him, you go get him. And that totally took all the anxiety away from me, because I realized, oh, okay, if he's unhappy, and he'll tell me,
Mm-hmm.
he'll tell me if he's unhappy. When we're going to do something, he'll say, I'd say, do you want to go back? And he'll say, yeah. And usually he's the one who asks me to go back because he's sick of me. So
Now, do you have over Robert? Do you have guardianship over him? Is he at that
yes,
cognitive? So you do. You have
I
that.
do over both boys, even though
Okay.
Sam is so high functioning, just because he's vulnerable in a way that people, and they have, and I'm sure, maybe one day we can revoke it. And we talked about that, but people can take advantage of him because he's so
Right.
sweet and trusting.
Right. I hear you on that. Is that you? Because you're Mama Bear. you keep them safe. You keep them safe
Oh yeah. Yeah.
all of the time. So your son, that transition took a while. Now, what about for your other son? So for those that don't know, I mean, he's thousands of miles away from you.
I know that was tough. People, a lot of people locally would say couldn't believe that he was, we're in South Carolina and he's in Minnesota, right?
Okay. And
And
what age did he make that transition at? He's 27 now.
he was 22. He had graduated from high school. He got a full ride to the university in our town because he's so bright. And so it was his choice. He wanted to try it, but he struggled, and he has a hard time with dealing with stress and with organizing his time, although he's progressed amazingly in that area since he's been at Minnesota Life College. But he spent a year after high school, and then taking one class at the community college when the university didn't work out for him, and he got increasingly depressed. I mean, just almost clinically depressed, and it also was very scary for us. And so I started looking for alternatives, and I found summer programs. He went to a couple of summer programs, and then I found Minnesota Life College. And so it was kind of like, that made the decision easier for me because he was so severely depressed. I knew I had to get him into something. It wasn't like I felt like getting him into something, or I thought. I knew I had to
Right.
do it, and I had to do it quick. And so I said, "You're going to the summer program." He's mad at me, and he went. And then afterwards, I said, "What do you think about going there next year for living there?" And he went for it. So
And you liked it. And what were the things that drew you? I mean, obviously, just in speaking with you, Minnesota Life College is an amazing, amazing facility, establishment, and place for these kids and young adults to transition onto. But
mhm.
what really drew you to it? What were like the top three things that you felt confident, like this is where he needs to be?
Well, first of all, I read about it online, and I thought, well, that sounds great. And
Mm-hmm.
then I thought, well, I'm going to go up there and visit. I went and sat in on the classes, and the
Mm-hmm.
classes are kind of reminding me of how the things that you and I don't know, it might not be this way with other moms, but my kids, Sam specifically, got to the point where he was so tired of me being the person to correct him or try to teach him social skills. He didn't want to hear it, and he was becoming not non-receptive to me. Where
Mm-hmm.
these vivacious people in the classroom that weren't me were teaching him the same things I was trying to teach him at home, and
Right.
and they were practical skills. They weren't these they were skills that were filling in the gaps that he needed to know to be independent. And it was just amazingly to the detail. And they took their time, with each kid, and they were understanding, but then they didn't put up with any nonsense either. If they were rude, they would say, stop and say, listen, so-and-so's talking. So
Mm-hmm.
it was full spectrum, teaching them everything they need to do to be successful in life. And then I had a interview with the director, and because I had a million fears, of course, which is what we moms do best, right?
Right.
And
Mm-hmm.
everything I brought up, I mean, even the smallest detail, she would nod and say, yeah, yeah. Like, for instance, Sam was a addict on his phone and on his gaming and on his computer. I'm like, I'm really concerned if he were away from me. Like right now, I have to lock it up at night. He would just be up all night, like doing it, because he will do that if somehow he gets the door unlocked. She goes, "Oh yeah, yeah, we have several students like that, and we have a system where they have to check in their phone and laptop to night staff, and then they can reclaim them in the morning." I'm like, awesome. So it was every
It was
concern I
it was
had.
like you were talking to somebody who already knew what you were going to say.
Right, someone who had so much experience, and they had all of the challenges I'd been dealing with. They'd already done it, and they already had a system to fix it. That's the thing.
Right.
Yeah. So
So that
mhm.
reassurance was there. And I think that's sometimes the hardest thing is taking that leap and trying things new, because you have been, I mean, since they have been little, I mean, it's an everyday process of advocating and fighting and making sure that they're
Mhm.
safe and that they don't get hurt. And now to let them go and try something, it's
Yeah,
literally like letting your baby, go and try
it's
something. You're just so scared.
scary.
I know some people have said, you don't ever let Marcus take the bus. I'm like, nope. He doesn't take the bus. I'm
I'm
like,
not ready.
I'm like, he's not taking transportation. I'm like, maybe when he's like 25, maybe I'll
Well,
be there then.
seriously, Minnesota Life College has a class called transportation.
Oh, to teach them how to.
I mean, it's every facet of life is taught. It's just amazing.
And so obviously, like you were telling me, you wouldn't be living in South Carolina and have him there if you didn't think that it was just absolutely
Oh,
outstanding.
and as an example of that, Sam, when he was living at home, I rode the bus with him to Trident Technical College before he took his class. And rode back with him to make sure he was familiar with how to get, look for his stop, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So when he got to Minnesota Life, and took the transportation class, he progressed each year, learning more and more about that. So now when he wants to come home, like at Christmas, he
Mm-hmm.
takes a bus to the light rail, a light rail to the airport, picks up a flight, gets a connection in Charlotte, and then flies home
Oh my gosh.
all by himself.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
So
Isn't it
just the
amazing?
the growth,
I
that
know.
you've seen, that is so amazing. And how long can he? Is there a cutoff time of how long he can stay there?
No, and that's the other beautiful thing about it. It was the only program I could find that once, like for instance, it's a 3-year program, and at the end of 3 years, they have the option of applying for the community living program, and that is situated on the same campus, but it's less. It's a variable amount of assistance, but it's overall less one-on-one from staff. in that program. But you have to prove that you have a certain level of independence before you're allowed in the program, because they don't have, it's not supposed to be a heavily supervised program. But it's
Okay.
fantastic. So that's what he's in now. He's been in his second year there now.
Okay, and being in that community, just that with his own living has gone great as well, just as great as when he was in the schooling program.
Oh yeah, it's actually situated in the same apartment complex. He's in another apartment with a roommate. He also is also in the community living program, and they get along great. And they can participate in the social. There's tons of social stuff going on all the time. They can do whichever ones they want. They could help with any job issues they get help with. And he has a weekly advisement, so he can talk about any problems he's having.
That is so great. It just makes me smile. It makes me smile to
Yeah.
know that there is hope out there. There is belief that there are other things that our kids can go on to and do in other places. But sometimes it takes a lot of research, and it takes a lot of looking, and it takes a lot of digging. And it may take, like in your situation, your young adult being farther away from you.
Mm-hmm.
But, you did the homework beforehand. And that's something that I also talk about. It's not like you can pick up a phone and call and be like, okay, this is the right spot. When I transitioned my son out of mainstream school into the school he's at right now, which is like more of a self-contained school, with all children that have different levels of disabilities, I went 6 times and sat in the classroom, over and over and over again to make sure that it's the right fit. And like you were saying, you traveled up to, Minnesota and went there and, saw for yourself. So I think that, as special needs parents, making sure that you are being diligent and continuing the advocacy, but going back to what you said, really need to take care of ourselves as well. Yes. And give us that time to have a great support system.
Mm-hmm.
Did you find any in the support realm? I know with having some good friends and stuff, did you join towards the middle, beginning, end, any type of autism support groups themselves, or really wasn't there any at that time?
When I started out, there was one in town I was in, but I quit going. My friend that was an ABA with me, we quit going because we were just frustrated. It was not really. It was more of a group so everyone could get together and cry. So it was a cry fest. Which crying, we all need to do that, but we were like, we wanted to find things to help our kids, and we weren't hearing it. And they thought that the road that we're on was not positive. So we thought, we need to stay focused and stay with people who are going to help us, help our kids. So.
Right. And I think that would be another great word of advice from you as well is, sometimes you find those support groups, and yes, we need to mourn, and yes, we need to, cry it out sometimes. But the only way that our children are going to get the best services is by us continuing that advocacy and digging and researching. And so submersing yourself with everyone that is just sad of the situation that their children have autism, instead of feeling they're blessed. You know what I'm saying? Like finding the blessing within the storm that you're in. In doing that, I think that's so great. Well, Kate, I thank you for spending the last 45 minutes or so with us. On this live, I am certain that there may be other moms that their children have autism and dads that might want to throw a question at you or reach out to you. Underneath this feed on Facebook, as this sits as a Facebook Live, I'm just going to welcome them to, throw comments down there, and you can check back at, your convenience to be able to maybe answer a few other particular questions that people may have as well. But I know you were going to get me the links for the Minnesota Life College, and then the other, what is the other one? Yeah, that one as well, so that we can drop those below, and hopefully we'll get them also on the show, so we can talk about more and get more support and education out about the different supports around the United States. So
That's good. Thank you so much, Tammy.
Thank you so much, Kate. Well, and I thank you all who have tuned in today. Like I said, if you're catching the replay, thank you as well. Know that you can hop on over to onairadvocate.com and link up with all of our social media applications, from YouTube to watch our tutorial videos, as well as our podcast, and Facebook as well. And then some of our other options, our community group that we have, and everything else. So with that being said, I hope you all have a fabulous Tuesday. Thank you again, Kate.
Thank
God
you, Tammy.
bless.
God bless.